Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2013 remake, reboot, sequel of Evil Dead. The film is co-written and directed by Fede Alvarez and has quite a few producers, two of them being Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi. The film stars Jane Levy, Shiloh Fernandez, Jessica Lucas, Lou Taylor Pucci, Elizabeth Blackmore and Phoenix Connolly. Now the film focuses on a group of friends, two of them being like brother and sister. We've got Mia, who is an ex-addict or a current addict, and they take her to the cabin in the woods as an intervention, really. They take their friend with them, Olivia, who is like a nurse, to be like, you know, to oversee everything, but their plan is to keep her in this cabin until she gets clear of her addiction. However, they discover some pretty sinister things have gone on at this cabin down in the cellar, and they find, obviously, the book, the evil book, that one of them foolishly reads from and unleashes evil on the group. Right. What are my thoughts on Evil Dead? Well, I remember when this came out, and I didn't go to the cinema to see this when it came out, that there was a real big buzz around this film when it came out. There was all sorts of taglines saying the scariest film of the year, and you know, this film is absolutely terrifying. All these quotes from this, that, and the other people, and it was getting a lot of buzz, it was refreshing, certainly at the time when it came out, because, you know, reboots, remakes, sequels, whatever you want to call them, of horror classics, didn't have a brilliant track record, and I think that's a fair thing to say. You know, there'd been a couple of gems here and there, but for the most part, they'd been pale imitations of the original. Now, and I know that the original Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, to a large degree, are deeply loved by the fan base of those movies. So to actually come back and try and redo what's come before and been done so well before is always a brave move. But I think what the director here has done, Fede Alvarez, is create a really visceral, really intense, fun, over the top horror roller coaster ride. I just think this is really brilliantly done. It feels fresh and original, while at the same time still having that DNA of the Evil Dead franchise, that I think would keep probably a lot of the fan base pleasantly happy. Now, I've always looked at this film as like a remake of Evil Dead, and there's some confusion anyway about the first two Evil Dead films. Is the second one a remake of the first one, or is it a sequel? Well, apparently it's a sequel. And Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi have both gone on record as saying that this is a sequel to the Evil Dead films. It's set years later, and it's set in the Evil Dead, after the Evil Dead trilogy. And there was even talk of them kind of doing another film following this, where the survivor of this film teams up with Bruce Campbell, and they were going to kind of do like a mashup of those two and continue like the story. But they kind of rejected that, the studio, and that's when they decided to do like the Ash versus Evil Dead TV show, which was successful in its own right, which was fair enough, because this film really did reignite people's interest in the franchise for sure. And it brought a whole new generation, I think, of fans to the Evil Dead franchise. The Evil Dead franchise has always had its following. It's always got its fan base. But, you know, to some, it's almost like, you know, they're almost like cult movies. You know what I mean? but this film, I think, freshened it and brought it to a modern audience, while at the same time, as I've said, keeping what makes this franchise so good. And this film, once it gets going, and it doesn't take long to get going. I mean, the initial opening of the film is pretty intense, but once it hits the ground running, this film, you barely get a chance to come up for air. It's just so intense, graphic, and makes you wince at a lot of the things that you see. It's just so brutal. At the way the film just so coldly dispatches the characters in this film. Now, one thing I think the film could have done a little bit better, to make us, and it wasn't necessarily something they needed to do back in the day, but I think it's something a lot of modern audiences certainly like to see, and I certainly do. Is I think they could have done a better job of fleshing out these characters a little bit more. Even the brother and sister, David and Mia, you get why they're all there. You get it's a fractured past. You get all that, but you don't get much else. So when it all starts kicking off, you do have a sense of loss, certainly with some of these characters, but not as much if I think they'd have put a little bit more effort into helping us connect with some of these characters. I think the film did a brilliant job as well of kind of pulling the wool over its audience's eyes, because for much of this film, and you could argue there's some minor spoilers here, but I don't mind so much. This isn't a new release, if you like. It did a really good job, I think, of making us believe that the brother was the hero of this piece, the Bruce Campbell of this piece, because he's kind of, the prominent figure throughout, the heroic figure throughout for the most part. And I think the film does a really good job of pulling the rug from under his feet in that sense. So I found this film hugely entertaining, and this is a film I have seen previously and I did enjoy previously. But after recently, obviously, watching and reviewing Evil Dead Rise, I've got a new interest in checking out these films, and I've definitely wanted to check this one out first before I go back to the originals, because this feels more in tune with Evil Dead Rise in a sense of, the modern take on the franchise sort of thing. I think they do sit together quite well, the two of them. It's got many a nod here, obviously, to the original franchise. I think there's some great fan service going on here. You've got plenty of scenes of limbs getting chopped off, very much like Ash in Evil Dead 2 with a chainsaw and things. You get chainsaws, you get the boomstick, you get the shotgun used quite a lot here in the film. And I think the most iconic scene is right at the end. The real nod to the fans is when you get the silhouette of Bruce Campbell saying groovy sort of thing, which hinted at more to come. So I've really got quite an affection for this film. I think it is superbly made. Obviously, the director went on to do Don't Breathe and stuff like that. He's a very talented director. I'd actually like to see him come back to the Evil Dead franchise, see what else he can give us. But I think this is definitely a really good entry into the franchise, and it's a film I have just actually as well recently added to the collection, because I didn't realise I didn't have it in the collection, so it's now been added. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll be back with more content on the channel very, very soon.